Three, two, one. Welcome to Jim's Take. I hope everybody's having a wonderful week. It's episode 143. We're going to talk about belief systems amid insane changes. It's been a while since I've done a podcast. It's been a few weeks since I've done one of these types of podcasts. And the world is very different since the last podcast. We've had our first almost 45 days of a new president. We've had massive amounts of change and chaos and and mayhem, just absolute mayhem. And so, in talking to the people, I was going to go two different paths on this episode. One was give a grade for the first 30 to 45 days of the new presidency, and from a leadership and change management perspective. Not from politics or whatever, yada, 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 yada. I don't like getting into politics. It's such a dicey thing. So I could touch on that just as lessons for leadership among those looking to bring their organizations through change. Because I have gotten some phone calls about how do I even talk about this to my people. So I'm going to touch on that. But then two, the real crux of what I want to get into, because I always do this kind of big picture corporate and then for the individual responding to whatever it is how do you respond? A lot of people are on this moral high ground about what the Republicans are or are not doing, or the Democrats are or are not doing. And the anxiety is going through the roof, reading all of these headlines and the absolute insanity that's coming out of Pennsylvania Avenue and all of that. And all it does is to drive us insane. Right? Where we feel like our hands are tied, there's really nothing to change, and how do we do this, and yada, yada, yada. And I was sitting there thinking about how can I coach someone? Everyone has ideas and opinions on how you're supposed to respond to change. But everyone, it's deafeningly silent when there's actual change and chaos going around. So the actual chaos that's being delivered out of Washington, D.C. impacts not just government employees, but those companies touched by government employees, touched by all of this. And I'll tell you right now, no work is getting done because everybody is just watching this like, what the hell is going to come next? And rather than drive up the anxiety, the fear, the whatever it is, the volatility, the uncertainty, all of this, is what can we do to eliminate that type of anxiety, right? And so I'm going to go into the second part of this podcast today is my belief system and the way that I've responded to change, drawing on some of the stuff from 2008 when the world was crashing and all that other stuff. And I have formulated these 6 beliefs that I have that are actually pretty core to my identity on how then I could use that to put a filter over whatever is coming and how do I respond. And so that will make more sense as I get to it. So first and foremost, let's talk about the grading of the presidency amid a leadership and change management perspective. You know what? I'm going to say it. I'll just say it. I'm going to give it a hard F. But I'm going to say this. Follow me, right? I know a lot of people will very much agree with me, and a lot of people will disagree with me. And this is where beliefs are going to come in. If you're thinking about leadership changes, change management, changing something that's going to affect large swaths of people, communication has to be a very important component of that. And there is no communication. It's just chaos. You've got people who have no understanding of what people are afraid of, what people are dealing with. There's lack of compassion, lack of consideration. And we're very quick to identify why it's wrong. This is not a Republican versus Democrat comment, right? Someone made a comment to me that I sounded like a Democrat, and I said, "Well, you need to." No, I'm just not a pro-Trump person. This is not a Republican versus Democrat challenge. The situation we find ourselves in is the fault of Republicans and Democrats alike, right? For Democrats who are on this moral high ground to put down the Republicans, where were their people of conscience and understanding of what this country needed when it actually mattered, right? And so there is this kind of challenge. We're always pointing fingers at everything else. But there's also this hypocrisy that just everything's bleeding in hypocrisy. When I go into my value system, I can identify hypocrisy very, very quickly because authenticity and trust is a strong value for me. And when we think about people who claim to be one thing but promote another. And we see this a lot, especially in large organizations, right? How many people were very quick to condemn the actions of the police against George Floyd, and were very quick for the headlines, but won't actually make the changes, right? How many are claiming to be Christians, but want to kick out the migrants? How many are claiming to be this, but then also want to do that, right? There's always this, your actions always have to follow what you preach. And we're not seeing that. We're seeing justification of things that we're doing as if we have to intellectualize this to make it okay. And more of those people I know who had supported Trump are coming around to say, well, this is kind of a disaster. It doesn't make the Democrats right. Okay, so that's one important thing. There is this psychological phenomenon, which I see more and more. It's called belief perseverance. That the more you're presented with evidence that contradicts what they believe, the more they believe what they actually believe, right? And I think we see that a lot with politics because it's such an emotional defensiveness that we get into of, we identify with these camps in this odd kind of way, and it's us versus them, and there really is this, it's just dumb and it's pointless, and there is no us versus them from a Republican and Democrat standpoint. There are more challenges, which I'm going to get into, I think, next week, is more on just the chaos of capitalism, how inequality in this country is now at levels higher than the French Revolution, and what are the decisions we're making, and the fact that the cabinet was in the second row, but the billionaires were in the front row is during the inauguration is just insane to me. And so, but we're hearing plenty on the chaos. But what I will remind you is when we focus externally on the chaos, it's a distraction because you're not going to change anything about the chaos at this moment. And so it only drives up this kind of anxiety. And so when we think about the necessary aspects of change, we have to cut stuff from the government, we spend too much, we waste money, blah, blah, blah. Absolutely, yes. But there are right ways and wrong ways to do things. And so when you're thinking about changing or promoting change within your organization, there has to be an authenticity component. There has to be a communication component. There has to have some kind of vision and justification for the things that you want to do. And while I personally believe the changes that are going through now are going to have long-term detriment to the country and to the world, I also don't believe that these changes are what we have built and espoused to be as an American nation. And so I have to say that. Now, that being said, I'm also a straight white guy, married, so I'm gonna be fine. But that doesn't make it okay. And so there's so the question is, how do we respond, right? And I tell this to some people who, when we get stuck at a point where we have no choice, people fight back, and there really is no alternative, and people are starting to feel like there's really no alternative here. And so I'm going to go through my personal philosophy. I have 6 philosophies, I guess, or beliefs that drive all of my living and my decisions and what I wish to do and where I wish to go. And when I see something like a Trump thing coming in, is I can understand why some of these things are necessary. I do not agree with almost all of these decisions, and there are better ways to do it, in my opinion. And so there are healthy outlets and unhealthy outlets to responding to the change. But at the end of the day, I still have to pay my bills. I still have to get up in the morning. I got to go get my work done. I got to do all of these types of things. But when chaos comes from the outside, all of a sudden your house gets messy. You're not really getting work done. You're not really accomplishing anything. And it just takes over. This anxiety takes over. They say, the Greeks used to say that pleasure was the ultimate goal of life, something along those lines. Epicurus used to talk about happiness, and happiness and pleasure is just the absence of pain. But what they were talking about really was anxiety and fear. And anxiety on these changes it has the potential to completely derail people. Some way more than others. I mean, there are people who are legitimately afraid, children who don't want to go to school. Like it's kind of, it's insane to me that a person would try and lead an organization and be so dismissive of a large portion of that population. So, Anyway, so let's go back into it. So how do we respond, right? I keep getting into the judgmental, and I'm sorry, right? This moral high ground that we can live on is disappointing. But remember, you always have your people, no matter what you believe. And when we can engage people in discussion, you're going to find that a lot of the things that we believe, everyone else believes as well, right? And there is a lot of common ground. It's just kind of devil in the details, and we blow them up and make them bigger things. And we watch Fox News or MSNBC, and we get distorted information. And so let's talk about the 6 things, right? And this is what I use. These are my 6 core beliefs. And I give this a lot. I do a lot of speaking on an executive philosophy. What do you believe? Understanding why. I believe this. Why, right? I love my kids. Why, right? What does that mean? And all of that stuff. And what's fascinating is nobody has ever asked me what I believe. I'm very often told that I'm wrong. But never in my life, I don't think, have I been asked what I believe. Except, actually, that's a lie. Yesterday, for the first time, I was on a call with a friend of mine from Mexico City, and I was talking about this podcast, and he said, "Oh, what do you believe?" And he said, "I can't wait to be in New York so I could share what I believe and we could have a discussion." I'm like, it's the right way to do it. It's so good. But in general, I'm very often told that I'm wrong. And when I say why, there's no real discussion. It's just more of a dismissive type of thing. And I get used to it, right? People like to feel superior to other people's ideas. We like to put other people down so we can feel better about ourselves. And that's really, it's a stress response is what it ultimately is. It's a stress response. By putting other people down, we think it actually levels us up. But in reality, at the end of the day, you're still down in the garbage, right? And so it's not a really productive way to respond. So here are my 6. I've said it a bunch of times. Here are my 6. Sorry, I have a cold, and so I go on tangents. Here are my 6 philosophies and why. And what I want you to do with this, hopefully it could be helpful. I don't know. But I think it's very valuable to have things that you believe. And remember that beliefs are not truths, but they have meaning to you. And when we believe something, you do not have a belief system in place until you can understand why somebody believes something else. And somebody believing something else is not an opportunity to correct them. It's an opportunity to have them share more of what they believe, because your belief system is supposed to evolve over time. So let's go. Number 1, my first belief, personal philosophy. There is nothing that can't be done. If you know me, you know I sign up for stupid shit all the time. Sign up for an Ironman. It was a mistake. Sign up for a second Ironman, which I haven't started training for. It's a mistake. But there's always something. Like life is an adventure. The purpose of life is to get out and experience different types of things. There really is no can't. And so my belief, and I think this is why people like working with me in a coaching capacity, is we have to dream. And we put these self-limiting kind of rules around us as to why we can't do things. But there are things that motivate us. There are things that we value. And one of my big motivations is to see if I could do something. And anybody can do an Ironman. People with no legs have done an Ironman. Now, you may not want to do an Ironman. That's okay, right? Or some people, it's just too hard. They just don't have the desire. That's fine. Don't let someone else assign you something that you just don't want to do. But with will and desire and something that you actually interest, you can do just about anything, in my personal belief. Start a business, write a book. Ain't nothing to it but to do it, right? That's ultimately it. Your desire to do that has to be bigger than your desire to not do it. Your desire to be thin has to be bigger than your desire to eat a cheeseburger. Your desire to be well-read has to be bigger than your desire to watch Netflix. I don't know, right? I mean, we've got these balances of what are the priorities in it. And so if we have something that we want to prioritize, we become what we prioritize. There is nothing that could stop us. I believe that. Okay? It's a belief of mine. We need help. We need all these things, but you can still do it. So that's number 1. But number 2, in addition to that, this follows that, is that there are no rules. And this came out a lot in COVID. There are no freaking rules. I used to live in a very rules-based environment. I used to work in I went to Catholic school. I worked in the finance industry. Like everywhere I lived was rules. And years after I launched my own business, I had this kind of dawning moment where I realized, like, there are no freaking rules. I can do whatever the hell I want. Now, I've had to amend this one recently. There are no rules. And my new second belief is there are no rules, ... but there are right and wrong ways to get things done. And checks and balances can be good and important depending on what the context is, okay? The way in which we do things impacts our ability to sleep at night. And when we go into our values, our motivations, the honesty of the way that we do it, the authenticity of who we are, living according to our values can guide our rules almost, even though there are no rules. You know what I mean? Like, we follow our values, and that's what helps us. So the example I would give, that I've been giving to a lot of people in my opinion on the Trump stuff, if you came to me and said, I want you to clean out my backyard, I got a bunch of leaves and old bushes in there, I just need you to clean it out. Say, got it. No sweat. There's nothing that can't be done. I could do that. But there are no rules. So I grab a tank of gasoline and I set it up and I just set the backyard on fire and I burn everything. And you come home and you're like, what the hell is that? I'm like, I got rid of the leaves. And you're like, but sparks went over and burned my neighbor's house. I'm like, it's not my problem. I got rid of the leaves. My neighbor's cat was in the backyard. It got charred. It's not my cat. Not my problem, right? There are right and wrong ways to do it. Like, I would have given you the rake that's in the garage and you could have just done it. So when we think about there are no rules, there are still right and wrong ways to do things. We interact with other people. There are consequences for decisions. I've already lost 2 potential clients because they lost funding, but they're not a government agency, but they are like, it's all like, it goes out, right? What's the cost of diplomacy? What's the cost of all these types of things? So there are, recognize that your decisions have impact beyond it, but there still are no rules, right? You just have to live with consequences. All right, so that's 2. So there's nothing that can't be done. There are no rules, but there are right and wrong ways to do things. These are beliefs of mine. Number 3, core belief of mine. Always make sure the last person gets home. Right? We all need support, especially now. Emotionally, monetarily, psychologically. It is the cost of society that people need support. And we have an obligation to the poor, the needy, the people who are in difficult times right now. We're the richest nation in the world. The fact that we can't accommodate this and figure this out is a joke. And we don't judge. Right? I mean, I don't understand this idea that, there's always been this kind of anti-poor people in this country. Even though we say it, right? All the churches talk about taking care of the poor and the needy and everything else. Vonnegut wrote, I want to say in Cat's Cradle, one of his books, I forget. Only in America will a poor person make fun of another poor person for being poor. And inequality in this country is out of control. And this is not a Republican versus Democrat. This is a top versus bottom. And it's why CEOs are getting shot, right? I mean, everywhere you turn, you're being nickeled and dimed and things are being taken away from you. And the last people are not getting home. And that is a guttural kind of drive now for me in terms of where I'm spending my time and trying things in terms of how do we support people to get them home. So that's number 3. Number 4, there is always room for one more. When I grew up, I have a big family. 75 first cousins. My mom's one of, I think, 7. My dad's one of 6 or vice versa. I don't know what it is. And they all had like 6 kids. I'm one of 6 kids. Like, we're big. We're around. We're everywhere. But growing up in the Bronx, and I had cousins all around there, people would just show up at your house. And it was amazing because they would just walk around and they would walk by the house. They pop in and you put the tea kettle on and everyone has a cup of tea and there's a little bit of cake left. You slice up for whoever's there and everybody gets a little bit. And I loved the unannounced visits of family because it was an adventure. You never knew what was coming. And cousins driving through the night would just say, hey, can I crash on the couch? Absolutely. There's always an extra bed. There's always an extra space. There's always room for somebody who needs something. And we talk about pleasure in life and we talk about what makes life good. And part of that is being in service of others. And this migrant talk in the States is the exact, I grew up also hearing about how the Irish coming to this country were rejected and harassed. I heard these stories weekly growing up about how inappropriate it was, the way the Irish were treated. And it was because they were poor and because they were Catholic and because of all these other reasons. And we're doing the exact same thing now. By those people who told me those stories about the wrongs that happened to the Irish people. It's hypocrisy, right? There is always room for one more. We have so much space in this country, so much money in this country. There is always room for one more. And even beyond that, the hypothetical migrant kind of deportation, whatever, think about your lunch table and the person sitting by themselves. There's always room for one more. We invite people to our table. That's what makes you a valuable asset to the people around you, right? When we can experience interactions with more and more people, right? We're social beings. We're supposed to invite more people to the table. We're supposed to make more room for people around the table. That's just what we do. That's, again, the cost of society. It's what makes this place great. And so when we're thinking about what we do on a daily, invite someone out for a cup of coffee. Do whatever you got to do, right? So there's always room for one more. That's that. All right. Number 5, belief of mine. I believe that heaven and hell exist. I have to throw something in there about religion, right? I just have to. Everyone always talks to me about religion. But they don't exist after we die. Heaven and hell exist, but not after we die. I would say we live in heaven or hell. That's the metaphor. Whether or not you believe in God, there's an authenticity when we are living true to our ideals and when we aren't living true to our ideals. When we're trying to be something that we're not. When we're trying to impress people that shouldn't be impressed. When we're trying to convince other people that we are this amazing person. We live in this world of insecurity. We do all these types of things. That's a form of hell. Jean-Paul Sartre, hell's other people. It's because we're always worried about what other people think. Our heaven is when we live in a state of grace, authentic to ourself, authentic to how we interact with others, authentic to the constant dynamic of what we need in relation to other people. And if we have to justify our actions, I would say this is a hot take. Maybe it's, if you have to justify your actions, then you are not living in heaven. Okay, if you have to come up with excuses and reasons as to why you believe something or do something, then you are not authentically you or what you claim to be, right? And we have this constant dynamic in us. We swing from heaven to hell. You don't just live in it all the time, but it takes honest and difficult conversations with us, ourselves, to get there. I could go into the ayahuasca stuff, but I won't. But that was a lesson, I think, also in my ayahuasca in terms of walking down the path. Hell is one way, heaven's another. And you get to choose what it is that you wish to do. And then my final belief, and this got me through a lot in 2008, this too shall pass, is so wise. Easier for me to say, again, straight white guy. But I do believe that we as people of conscience can prepare for better times around the bend. And I used to do it. It was just this thing that got me through all the time. We'd be doing quarterly earnings calls. We had to do all these crazy decks and we're working crazy hours. And I knew that earnings call was at 7 o'clock in the morning or something on a Tuesday. I was counting down at 8:30 on Tuesday. This is all going to be over, right? Will things be painful? Yes, they will. Can we fix them? Yes, we will. But we find our people and we welcome people around our table and we have more in common than we think and we can get through this together. I do believe that. And we should try. We try, right? Go back. There's nothing that can't be done, right? Follow the circle, right? Live your world, but you can always try, but it doesn't dictate everything that you do. So when we think about my values, my motivations, my altruism, my honesty, my, authenticity, all that, we're very quick to put down others. And that's not helpful to get through chaos and change and VUCA environments. The old saying that became very popular in 2008, VUCA. Volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. That's an environment we live in and drives stress. And so how are we going to change the way we consume information, the way we respond to information. News, social media are meant to distract you from who you are. And when you think and reflect, reading the news, going through your social feed, screaming that someone's right or wrong, what is that taking you away from that you could be doing for you? I'm not saying don't pay attention. I'm saying put your attention where it should be. So get out, go for a run, clean your house, interact with a stranger with no agenda, eat the right kind of food if you could afford it, play some Beethoven or Dua Lipa, whatever you want, right? That concert hall thing was amazing. If you haven't listened to the Dua Lipa Albert Hall concert thing, it's phenomenal. I'm not that kind of music, but I dig that one. But find the beauty around you. Find the love around you. That's the choice that we have. Every day you have a choice on where you're going to push your attention, where you're going to put your time, where you're going to put your focus. And it doesn't mean you stop standing up for what's right and what you believe. But putting others down and trying to prove someone wrong, and accepting the anxiety that comes with chaos does nobody a favor, especially you. So anyway, I hope that's, as you think about your beliefs, hopefully that can guide you in some kind of way on what really matters to you. And yeah, that's just kind of my thoughts on that. 25 minutes. Holy cow. And I'm sick. How about that? Right? There's got to be another belief system on why I've been sick like every week this winter. Something's going on. I'm going to open the windows. Have a wonderful week. Thank you for listening. I hope this was helpful. And more to come. Maybe not next week. 2 weeks. Chaos of capitalism. That's what's going to be next. I'll talk to everybody soon. Have a wonderful week. Thank you.